Hello everybody, my name is Abhishek. I am a PhD scholar at University of Hamburg and also a faculty there, of course contractual. And before joining University of Hamburg as a PhD scholar and a faculty, I was working with National University of Judicial Sciences as assistant professor. I'm here to talk about the criminology. However, the topic that I am dealing with within the module of criminology is organized crime, its nature, meaning, and forms. That's what we are going to discuss in this present module. Now, an organized crime, basically what we first need to understand how it is a distinct crime from the normal crime that we understand in our day-to-day understanding. Before we talk about the concept of organized crime as it exists in the criminal law, it is absolutely important here for us to discuss the meaning of the term crime and then develop upon it the concept of organized crime. The two central question would be that how crime is different from organized crime. In other words, could we study a crime within the organized crime, or could we study the concept of crime within the concept of organized crime, or vice versa? So what we are trying to study here is to first understand, is there a distinction between organized crime and crime per se? So in order to understand that, let us first say what exactly is a crime, right? And then we'll see what exactly is an organized crime. A crime is basically an act which is prescribed by the state, and the violation of that or commission of that act would result into a punishment which is determined by any given statute. Now, there are various kind of crime that can be envisaged and which are manifested under various statutes. For example, in India, you have Indian Penal Code, which is a code for various kind of crimes. Then you have companies laws. Then you have SEBI Act, and you have labor laws where several acts has been made, has been given the criminal sanctions. So crime, the concept of crime is not limited or restricted to a particular statute. It is widespread. It is present in various aspects of the legal studies. Organized crime, however, is a crime, but is a crime of its own kind, and that's why it does not find its mention in the typical statutes that you have in the form of Indian Penal Code. What is organized crime? It is for us to understand from the sociological point of view first, and then we'll go to the legal aspect of the concept of organized crime and how it is dealt under international law and the municipal law of India. Now, as I said, the exact concept of organized crime is still debated, and so is its definition. How you define organized crime, it's difficult because it has so many manifestations, it has so many forms that if you go on to define by taking each and every form into consideration, it becomes very hard to grasp. It's the phenomena of organized crime. Therefore, there is no fixed definition or the universally accepted definition so far has not been come up. However, there are few definitions which has been attempted. The concept is a fluid concept, so much so that it is termed as sometimes, or it is termed as something whose attraction as well as weakness is that one can read almost everything and anything into it. This is a definition which you can find in the Michael Levy's book, The Organization of Serious Crime, which is published by the Oxford in the form of Oxford Handbook of Criminology, 3rd edition, 2003. Now, as I said, that an organized crime is a sui generis system, and therefore it's a distinct crime. What is a sui generis? Sui generis means something of its own kind. That means you cannot read it or couple it with the other ordinary crimes, because the other ordinary crimes may, before they are committed or they are planned, they might have a certain organization behind it, but that organization or planning does not make that crime an organized crime. Why so? Because we'll see in over a period of time that organized crime, as a part of its definition of a law, required certain essential components for a crime to be considered as organized crime, and hence merely organization or some preparation beforehand for a crime does not make a crime organized crime. And it is this factor which distinguishes organized crime from an ordinary crime. Now, for example, Mr. A and Mr. B knows Mr. C is an affluent individual. They abduct his son and demand a huge sum of money. This is a simple crime which happens in every society, and to counter or prevent it, we have laws such as IPC and other acts which we need time to time. Now, if we see that if Mr. A and B are caught by the law enforcement agencies, they would be charged under various offenses as prescribed under the Indian Penal Code, such as criminal conspiracy under Section 120B of IPC, abduction, Section 362 and 364A of IPC, extortion, Section 383 and Section 384 of IPC. Now, if the same crime is committed where Mr. A and Mr. B were not merely interested in the ransom specifically from Mr. C, because the ransom may come from any other person. So what they were interested rather is the business of ransom. That they are interested, the crime would remain essentially ransom centric. And in order to make it effective, they will create a structure where they will have information, they will have people to carry out such activities, and they will have police into their under their belt. They will have other contracts so that they can effectively and smoothly carry out these kind of crimes. So it will not be a one-off crime where Mr. A and Mr. B knew Mr. C and they did it just because they needed some money and they picked up the son of Mr. C. Whereas if Mr. A and Mr. B are involved in this crime where they have made it their business, that means they keep on abducting the son or daughter or anyone else of an individual, and in return of that body or that person, they keep on asking the money. The phenomena which we can see in Bihar or in certain part of Uttar Pradesh, where people have made this a professional activity of their own. This is where the organized crime get itself distinguished from the concept of the ordinary crime. We should not focus, because this is one-off illustration. This illustration is not the only illustration through which we can understand the organized crime, because the business interest or the monopoly in the business interest or the area of business that they want to play in can be anything. It can be narcotics, it can be money laundering, it can be abduction, and any other crime such as bootlegging or anything, that trafficking that you can imagine. So to commit such crimes, when you need a huge structure in a very scientific manner, so that these acts at every step of their transactions are carried out smoothly, they acquire a structural form, and this structural form is given the structure, the crime, the nature of organization. Because of this structure provides the organizational basis for a crime to be committed on a regular basis. Now, so let's talk about the definitional aspect. Most of the definition that you will study for organized crime will have inevitably two limbs therein. The first will be the requirement of the structure that facilitates commission of crime by providing a platform. And this structure that we are talking about should not be an impromptu structure. This structure must have some time elapsed. So for example, if two people come along or 5-6 people come along and then they plan some crime to be committed, and then they divide the workload between themselves and then they go and commit the crime, there is a structure in it, but this structure is not the structure that organized crime seeks, because this was an instant structure created or constituted for that particular crime to be committed. And once that crime is completed, the transaction is done, the structure will dissolve itself ipso facto. So the structure that we look for in the organized crime is a structure which must have some time period elapsed, and which we will see has been made the part of definition of various organized crime definitions that has been accepted by the international organizations or even the municipal statutes. Now, after the structure, the second element is the element of a purpose for which such structures are formed. Now, a purpose can be anything. For example, it can be for the monopoly over a business trade. Let's say money laundering. You do not want other people to To come and transact in this business, that's also a purpose. To acquire a particular market, that's also a purpose. To have a say in a particular business or in ideology, that also acquires a purpose. So it can be commercial profit, acquisition of power, or acquisition of certain markets, or ideology. So these two components you will find inevitably present in all the definitions of the organized crime. These, again, to repeat, the two limbs for a definitional aspect of an organized crime would be the structure for the commission of such crimes and the purpose for which such structures are formed. And that will also determine the nature of the structure. That means what kind of people are involved in such structures. The organizational structure creates market-like situation. It is this interplay of organizational structure and its catering to a niche market. It creates sui generis system of organized crime. A market which every society would not like to be present in their society. However, because of the nature of profit or the power play, such markets are created. For example, narcotics. No society would like to have a market for narcotics. Money laundering. No civilized society would like to have a market for money laundering. Or trafficking, human trafficking. No civilized society would like to have a market where there is demand and supply for the human traffic. So organized crime would create such market because of the demand and supply thing. They will acquire the ability to deliver to those demands, and by delivering such demands, they create a market-like structure within the structural edifice of the organized crime. Now, how the concept was evolved, organized crime, where was it studied? It's not the India where the problem of organized crime surfaced. The concept of organized crime was first surfaced in the United States of America, and it was studied also there in the United States of America. Therefore, it is important for us to understand how did they approach to the problem of organized crime, what was their solution, and what was their analysis about the problem and the solution. Therefore, the exact term, that means organized crime, was first time used in 1896 in the annual report of the New York Society for the Prevention of Crime. The study and its further evolution gave birth to debate if the organized crime is who-centric or what-centric. A who-centric concept of organized crimes focuses on who has committed the crime. Thus, it is a particular group of person whose act could only be constitutive of organized crime, otherwise not. To illustrate, for example, in America, it was seen that the certain Italian people, they created a mafia or an organizational structure to commit a crime, which was called as mafia. So what they understood initially in the United States of America, that it is the Italians, whenever they are involved in certain crimes, it will be organized crime, and if other person are doing the same crime, it will not be an organized crime because it is not created by the Italian family-based structural criminal bodies. So this approach initially taken in America is called the who-based approach. That means they said that it is the people or the ethnicity of the people who are committing certain crimes would only be constitutive of organized crime. And if the similar crimes are committed by certain other people, this will not be an organized crime. Now, the second approach that later on developed was the what approach. That means instead of who is committing it, what is being committed to be the determining principle for the understanding of the organized crime. For example, the activity, certain illegal activity in narcotics, in money laundering, or in human trafficking, or in similar other things, were taken as the prime or the primary source for the commission of for the commission of organized crime. So these two approach essentially and initially determined the scientific approach for the study. That means the first was the who-based, and then later on the what-based approach. Who-based approach was the result of the study of a special committee to investigate organized crime in interstate commerce in the United States of America, which was constituted in 1950 under the chairmanship of Mr. Coffever. The effect of Coffever Committee and later on the Joe Valachi's deposition before the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations on the epistemology of organized crime was the merger of organized crime with the concept of mafia. This made the organized crime always to be seen from the prism of mafia. As I said, this was the who-based approach. That means they said, since it's the Italians who normally carry out this kind of activity, therefore this is how the organized crime should be seen. That means anywhere when the Italian family-based structure or any Italian organized attempt to commit a crime would be essentially an organized crime. Thus, the conclusion was that if a crime hitherto in the United States was to be organized crime, it must be committed by the mafia. Kauffer Committee's report led to the enactment of what we call Racketeer Influenced and Corrupted Organizations Act of 1978. Organized crime was being seen from the prism of mafia, not only in the USA, but in Europe and other parts of the globe too in early 1960s. So the who-based approach dominated the concept of organized crime till 1960, not only in the United States of America, but also in the Europe. Now the paradigm shift or the inflection point of the organized crime was the Dwight Smith study. When he made the study of organized crime, he shifted it from who to what-based approach. So the credit of what-based approach for the study of organized crime is to Mr. Dwight Smith's study. And it was soon realized by various authors that organized crime could never be curbed and understood if its focus remained on who, and that is mafia. This led to new definition, and this definition was based on illicit enterprise or illegal enterprise. That means what-based approach. And as I said, the chief proponent of illicit activity-based understanding of organized crime was Dwight Smith. He provided that illicit enterprise or illegal enterprise was an extension of legitimate market activities into areas normally proscribed. That is, beyond existing limits of law for the pursuit of profit and response to a latent illicit demand. What essentially it entails is that the same business activity, if done with illegitimate means, would convert itself into an organized crime because of the very nature or the very means or tools employed to commit such activities where the profits were being seen, were to be drawn from. So this market activities, for example, there can be a market in the vegetable selling, but if you're involved into the hoarding of the vegetables, which leads to the artificial hike in the prices, and then for that you create a structure where you involve people, you involve hoarders, you involve the traders, you involve the politicians and the other state departments who are into the which are anti-commission, anti-competition business activities. When you form a structure where all these people are on board to artificially hike the vegetable prices, then it will, a legitimate act becomes an illegitimate action because the means involved are illegitimate, and this would be the true indicative or suggestive of the phenomena of organized crime. Now, so what he has introduced essentially is the idea of what-based approach in the conceptual silhouette of organized crime. He emphasized that organized crime was basically a market-centric concept, in which means are such which make the entire transaction illegal, or sometimes market per se is outlawed. For example, the market in the narcotics. You will not like to have drugs being sold on a convenience store or the store next door to you. But when such markets are created, demands are induced by pumping such products in the market initially cheaply, and once people get addicted, then selling it at exorbitant prices because the market is now created, and to get out of that market is pretty tough. Such kind of crime or the criminal activities would be the indicative of the organized crime. So he's shifted from who to what. That means what kind of crime you're committing. what kind of transactions you are committing in order to determine whether it is an organized crime or not. Now, international law and organized crime. Before we saw how it was evolved, how the municipal studies went across it initially, that is United States, and then later on how international law responded to it, and after that we'll come to the Indian response to the organized crime. Now, international law and organized crime is a very tricky concept to understand, because international law does not deal organized crime as international crimes. It deals it as transnational crimes. What is the distinction? We'll see in a while. So organized crime came under international law, and it is primarily governed through the United Nations Conventions Against Transnational Organized Crime 2000. We'll call it UN Convention for the purpose of this presentation. One may be perplexed as to why international law treats organized crime as transnational crime and not as international crimes. Because we know that Rome Statute of International Criminal Code is the one that deals with the international crime. However, if we read the preamble of the Rome Statute, it does not use the word transnational crime, it uses the word international crime. For example, it reads, recalling that it is the duty of every state to exercise its criminal jurisdiction over those responsible for international crimes. So the word is international crimes and not the organized crime. Whereas the UN Convention uses the word transnational crime for the organized crime. So there's a distinction between international crime and transnational crimes. So what is the distinguishing features or the elements of a transnational crime and the international crime? So when states constitutes international crime, they do it for the international community as a whole. That is human society as a singular entity. However, when a state constitutes a crime within its national boundaries, it only caters to the society which comes within the purview of its territorial and jurisdictional writ. So first, international crime is constituted where all the states come together and they say that certain crimes will be considered as international crimes only in international law, and a state will get jurisdiction to prosecute such crimes as a part of their universal jurisdiction and not as in the capacity of their local jurisdiction. Because, for example, let's say the crimes committed in Yugoslavia against the people of Yugoslav nationality, if a person who committed such heinous crime is found in India, we can try and prosecute that person despite the fact that we do not have neither territorial connection or the ratione personae connection with the crime committed. Therefore, the international crime is something that gives the basis or birth to the universal jurisdiction. Now, in contrast to that, United Nations Convention's transnational organized crime defines it in a different perspective. But before we go to that, let us see the genesis of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. On 5th November 2000, the 55th session of the United Nations General Assembly adopted the UN Convention. It came into force on 29 September 2003. As of July 2016, it had total 187 members, Democratic People's Republic of Korea being the newest entrant, joining the UN Convention on 17th June of 2016. India signed the United Nations Convention on 12 December 2002 and ratified the same on 5th May 2011. It is also known as Palermo Convention as it was adopted in the Palermo, Italy. The UN Convention is further supplemented by 3 protocols thereto. The first protocol is Protocol to Prevent, Suppress and Punish Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. The second protocol is Protocol Against the Smuggling of Migrants by Land, Sea and Air, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against the Transnational Organized Crime. The third and the last one is the Protocol Against the Illicit Manufacturing of and Trafficking in Firearms, their parts and components and ammunitions, and again supplementing the United Nations Convention Against the Transnational Organized Crime. United Nations Convention defines the transnational organized crime rather than organized crime. The UN Convention does not provide for a singular definition of transnational organized crime. On the contrary, the UN Convention provides for definition of what is an organized crime, criminal group, the UN Convention instead provides for definitions of what is an organized criminal group, serious crimes or offenses to be committed by these organized criminal group, and what is it that provides a transnational character to the organized crime. An organized crime criminal group for the purpose of the United Nations Convention is a structured group of 3 or more persons existing for a period of time and acting in concert with the aim of committing one or more serious crimes or offenses established in accordance with the convention in order to obtain directly or indirectly a financial or other material benefit. A serious crime for the purpose of United Nations Convention is something some conducts the consulting an offense punishable by maximum deprivation of a liberty of at least 4 years or a more severe penalty. This is Article 2B of the United Convention, where the definition of serious crime is provided. By the definition of serious crime, it is easy to deduce that every serious crime is an offense. However, converse is not true. That means every offense is not a serious crime. It is also clear that any offense having a punishment depriving a convict of more than 4 years or more of his or her civil liberty would be ipso facto a serious crime. It is committed by an organized criminal group. Offenses have been used as a genus and crimes as their species in the UN Convention. It has not specified any particular crime, such as extortion, drug peddling, human trafficking, etc., to be the exclusive subject matter of transnational organized crime. As I said, the crimes has to be taken from the municipal statutes. The requirement for the UN Convention would be that it must be something for which the punishment is more than 4 years and depriving the civil liberty of the individual. Now, Article 6 provides for the criminalization of the laundering of the proceeds of the crime. A proceeds of the crime has been defined under the UN Convention as any property derived from or obtained directly or indirectly through the commission of an offense as stated under Article 2E. So what it says that if the municipal laws has not prescribed or has not criminalized the proceeds of money laundering as a crime, then they must do so in their municipal act. Another offense that is envisaged under the UN Convention is criminalization of corruption to the extent suitable and consistent with the legal system of the state parties. Now, for this purpose, they must adopt legislative, administrative, or other effective measures to promote integrity and to prevent defect and punish the corruption of public officials. The last offenses recognized under the UN Convention forming the subject matter of organized criminal group, making a crime to be transnational organized crime is the criminalization of the obstruction of justice. Now, in order to sum it up, what you need to understand is that the convention does not provide for the offenses. It provides a framework for the various countries to come together and to cooperate in curbing such practices. For example, if Mexico has the drug cartel and the Americans becomes the consumer of that drugs, the Americans and the Mexicans needs to come together and to cooperate with each other in order to curb such practices. So the United Nations Convention does not define organized crime. It simply takes the crimes from the statutes and then says both the parties to cooperate with them. Now, let's say if something is a crime in the statute of country A, but the same is not this crime in the statute B, then there will be problem in the cooperation. And therefore, it encourages the state parties to enact and criminalize such acts in order for them to cooperate with each other effectively. So United Nations Convention does not, unlike the Rome Statute, does not provide for the crime of does not provide for the organized crime. It merely provides for the platform for various states to come together and to deploy their resources to cooperate with each other in curbing the transnational organized crime. Or why transnational? Because most of the organized crime has presence in more than one countries, and therefore they need the two countries to cooperate each other because of the sovereignty issue, jurisdictional problems, and all other things. United Nations Convention provides for this a platform where such obstacles can be overcome. Now, the Indian aspect of organized crime. Currently, there are piecemeal legislation enacted by certain states, such as Maharashtra Control of Organized Crime Act 1999, which is popularly termed as MACOCA, or Uttar Pradesh Gangsters and Anti-Social Activities Prevention Act of 1986. In short, it is also called the Gangster Act. The subject matter of MACOCA is more or less unblemished vis-a-vis its relation to theoretical explanation of organized crime as we have understood. However, it includes insurgency as one of the purpose of the organized crime, which is debatable. The word organized crime has been defined in MACOCA, of course. Section 2E defines it. It defines organized crime as organized crime, which means any continuing unlawful activity by an individual, singly or jointly, either as a member of an organized crime syndicate or on behalf of such syndicate, by use of violence or threat of violence or intimidation or coercion or other unlawful means, with the objective of gaining pecuniary benefits or gaining undue economic or other advantage for himself or any person for promoting insurgency. Now, insurgency part we'll see in a while, but if you see, the essential element of this crime, the definition that we have provided, is that it is not only that it can be committed by a group, it is even a person who is an individual and is committing a crime which is listed in MACOCA singly also, he can be prosecuted for the crime of the organized crime. Similarly, the other important thing is that the use of violence has been emphasized. That means if there is no presence of the violence, then perhaps the same crime would not be committed for the purpose of MACOCA, would not be an organized crime. Now, in Zamir Ahmed, Latifur Rahman Sheikh versus the State of Maharashtra 2010 5 SEC 246, it was held that MACOCA does not deal with insurgency per se, it deals with indirectly to bolster the definition of organized crime. So the whole dispute was that since the insurgency, or there are certain matter which is exclusive to the domain of the legislation of the parliament, and the state legislature, by enacting on those domains which are the part of list 1, has in fact transgressed its power as given in the article 246, and therefore the constitutionality of the definitional aspect of MACOCA was challenged by saying that the subject matter of insurgency or is something only the union parliament or the parliament can legislate, and not the state legislature has competency to enact on that. This argument was rejected in the Zamir Ahmed Latifur Rahman Sheikh case, where it was said that the MACOCA does not deal with the insurgency per se, it merely deals with the aspect of insurgency where the organized crime is committed. Now, since we have seen Gangster Act, since we have seen MACOCA, let's have a quick glance at the Gangster Act as it is existing in UP. The Gangster Act lays down the ingredients of its subject matter in the scope of application clause, which defines what is it that constitute gang for the purpose thereof. Now, Section B states that a gang means a group of persons who, acting by violence or threat or show of violence or intimidation or coercion with the object of disturbing peace, order, or of gaining any undue temporal, pecuniary, material, or other advantage for the purpose of certain benefits, indulge in antisocial activities. Now, what is antisocial activities becomes the focal point of this definition. So it is also been defined. Antisocial activities, among other things, the statute says are, for the purpose of Gangster Act, are offences punishable under the chapters 16, 17, 18 of the IPC, and host of other violation of laws such as UP Excise Act, Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substance Act of 1985, suppression of immoral traffic in women and children, 1956, Public Gambling Act, 1867, and certain other acts. These all activities have been termed as the antisocial activity. Now, Post Unlawful Activities Amendment Act, that means UAPA, the concept of organized crime was merged. That means the UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, dealt with the concept of what we mean by the organized crime, because it has also certain elements of the organized crime. One of the questions that arose, whether terrorism can be termed as organized crime. Right? This is the main issue. It was in UAPA, that means Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, said that terrorism is a distinct offense. Now, by providing for the definition of what is terrorism, what are the elements through which terrorism can be committed, it was taken outside the ambit of the organized crime. So terrorism is no more an organized crime as it is dealt under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The insertion of terrorism in UAPA was consequent to the Security Council Resolution 1373 in 2001, where the states were mandated to bring about the legislative changes to deal and tackle with the menace of terrorism. So this is nuts and bolts of the organized crime and how it is dealt in India and across the globe. Thank you very much. I hope this presentation is a supplement to the other modules that you are studying in as a part of criminology, as a part of your criminology studies, and this is an addition to your overall understanding of the criminology and organized crime in a nutshell.